Well, West Virginia's wild roller coaster ride of a season is over. And it's over sooner than many thought it would be, or many thought it should be, maybe is the better way to put it. West Virginia losing to Syracuse, that old Big East rival throwback, Bob Huggins losing to Jim Boeheim less than 48 hours after Bob Huggins accomplishes 900 career wins, something Jim Boeheim had done long ago, really. Bob Huggins loses to Jim Boeheim. WVU loses to Syracuse. Yes, as a 3 seed. Yes, to a Syracuse 11 seed. But West Virginia couldn't handle Syracuse, couldn't handle the zone, and WVU failed to get to the Sweet 16. On this episode of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, and of course WV Sports Now, I'm Mike Asti, and I'm going to tell you why, that's a disappointing conclusion to this season. That overall, this is a disappointing season, and the word disappointing rings true for WVU at the end of this season. But it also wasn't a bad season. Disappointing is the word for a reason. You're disappointed this team didn't go further. You're disappointed the talent on this team and how well they were playing at a point when they were number 6 in the country after 3 out of 4 ranked team wins and stacking up quadrant 1 competition on the schedule and playing well against them. Why this is a team that didn't go further, at least to hanging a Sweet 16 banner. You're disappointed. That makes sense. But also why it's not really a bad year and why a lot of the slander going on right now about this season, about Bob Huggins in particular, why all that's asinine. I'm going to guide you through an evaluation to West Virginia's 2020-2021 season. Now, I'm going to try to evaluate this season as quick as I can. I don't want this to be a long show, but let me tell you, this is a topic that I could discuss for hours on end and actually was touched on the final post-game show with Cody Nesper of WV Sports Now, of course, to recap this season. Because the loss to Syracuse, round of 32, it's all she writes, doesn't get to the Sweet 16, which I had said that was the benchmark. This team, once they reached the top 15 perennially, once they crawled all the way to number 6 in the country, off the gauntlet of a schedule that they had, and playing in the best conference in the country in the Big 12, at least during the regular season, with all the ranked teams and all the teams ended up getting into the tournament. And some floundered and didn't achieve what they were supposed to, maybe looked to be overrated, Texas in particular. But the other conference that was in competition for best conference of the year, the Big 10, same thing could be said. Illinois not getting to the Sweet 16, Ohio State losing in the first round, certainly some scabs on the Big 10 as well. And I had said that because of all of that, despite 9 losses, and they lost too many games, and maybe it should have been a number 2 seed, and they lost some games they shouldn't have lost, and yes, they puttered away the season at the end with those back-to-back losses to Oklahoma State, including that early exit in the Big 12 tournament, and one of those losses even being without Cunningham for OSU. It could have been a number 2 seed. It maybe wouldn't have been a number 2 seed. I could have argued they actually should have fell to a number 4 seed based on how they finished the year, but they ended up finishing as a 3. But taking that all into totality in that last month and a half with everything going on that it was, all of that going on, heading into the tournament, I made it clear that if you had to get to the Sweet 16 based on the landscape, based on who the teams were in the bracket, based on the region, which not the toughest region out there, but certainly not the easiest. Morehead State was a team coming in red hot with an upset tournament championship victory in their conference tournament. Not an easy team by any means, tougher than, say, Cleveland State, the team Houston faced in the first round. West Virginia took care of business, though. McBride dominated, had one of the better individual performances for a Mountaineer player in the NCAA tournament ever. But I had said they need to get to the Sweet 16 at minimum. Anything else would be gravy, okay? I had others, a personal podcast of mine. I had a colleague, friend telling me that Elite 8, Final 4 with this kind of talent. Now, McBride's too inconsistent. Culver hadn't been good in a while. He looks like he hasn't been healthy. Can't even fit in really well with McBride. We'll get to all that in a moment here. But I thought Sweet 16 made sense. 2 tournament wins, Sweet 16. That was being very, very fair and realistic, I felt. But some could have argued more with that team being at one point number 6 in the country, going from not ranked top 15 to flirting with the top 10, getting right there on the cusp, to then their best player on the team, or at least the player they thought would have the most NBA potential, having that NBA potential in Oscar Tshiebwe, leaving unceremoniously in some controversy to Kentucky right at the start of the new year. Everyone looking for that refreshed 2021 WVU getting slapped in the face at the start of the new year. And then puttering it away, McBride struggling, having to switch things around, a new strategy, of course, and ending up top 15, then to number 6, falling back a little bit with those last couple losses. I thought Sweet 16 had to happen. It didn't. It did not. So they finished at the round of 32. They finished as a 3 seed at round of 32, losing to an 11. Granted, looking at the game, I watched the game, analyzing the game, and every matchup does matter in the NCAA tournament. This was a bad matchup for West Virginia. Syracuse was a bad matchup. I get it sucks as a fan, especially a historic fan, losing to Syracuse, and I get there in 11, so it's kind of embarrassing and stings a bit. It, I guess, is an upset. But as I told a Syracuse reporter who was in my DMs before the game, West Virginia is probably going to lose this game because they hadn't dealt with the zone all year. They hadn't dealt with the zone in a while, in fact, and these players don't know what they're doing with the zone. And I'm not saying they didn't show up for the game or they're out partying. We would have heard about it if they were, by the way, in this media cycle in a bubble tournament. They weren't. They were trying their damn best. But you're asking a team that doesn't know the zone to deal with the zone in less than 48 hours. Wow, they're celebrating the 900th win. Maybe the 900th win would have been better served to happen in the regular season or the conference tournament to get it out of the way so that you're not popping champagne, having a party, and having every national outlet want to talk to you in the middle of the NCAA tournament. That probably wasn't great as a distraction. These players hadn't experienced the tournament before. That's why Culver admittedly said after the first round, a game he struggled, certainly in the first half, that he was nervous by being in the damn NCAA tournament, a tournament that he hadn't been into before, hadn't had that experience before. And it was a young team overall. McBride, a sophomore, in terms of who's leading the team, is the best player, of course, Taz, etc. They're older. They're going to probably leave to go play overseas, which I'll also get to in a moment. But it just wasn't a good matchup. They couldn't deal with the zone early in the game, clearly. They were eventually able to figure out, kind of just taking whatever shot was given to them in that first half. They kind of shied away from threes because they're not a three-point shooting team. But if that's the only shot given to you and you don't take it, then you're likely going to try to force something. It wasn't there, and that led to turnovers. It was a really, really bad first half. They did come back towards the end, make it a game, and give fans some reason for hope. Certainly came back at the end of the second half and the end of the game, losing only 75-72 to a team that, again, incorporates a zone that they weren't used to dealing with. So you lose in the round of 32. And that sucks. It's not the Sweet 16. Anything else would have been gravy, but you got to at least get to the Sweet 16 when you're number 6 in the country at one point, when you're perennially number 15, within the top 15 most of the season. Sure, I hear it. I hear you. But I also did a show right behind me there, midway through the season, actually towards the end at that point, I would imagine prior to those Oklahoma State losses, I believe, that I said this was the best coaching performance of Bob Huggins' career. And this is a man who we all know, despite being snubbed from Hall of Fame, 900 wins, 2 Final Fours, including one at West Virginia, which is only the second in program history, first in half a century. He's offered some of the best basketball moments and memories in the program history, by the way. So again, the slander makes no sense. Not Huggins' fault. But I don't know if I'm going to go that far now in totality because you don't get to the Sweet 16. But it's one of them in terms of Huggins' best coaching performances. This 2020-2021 season, one of Huggins' best coaching performances, for sure. I could still argue that if I really wanted to. 2 Final Fours, Big East Conference Championship. Did it at non-Blue Bloods all the way through without McDonald's All-Americans. Sweet 16s, Elite 8s through his career. He's won a lot of games, obviously. Helped a lot of players achieve more than maybe some would have thought and get the most out of their careers. Javon Carter in the NBA, getting a contract, doing well on another team, integral force on that team with the Suns now. Wouldn't be possible without Huggins in all reality. And we know Kenyon Martin and what he became in the NBA. That got to be some credit to Huggins, even though he is, I would say, the best college player that Huggins was ever able to coach, and that was early in his career, obviously, with Cincinnati. That this season's not Huggins' fault, number one. Huggins had to deal with a star player who he originally built the team all around, controversially leaving the program. And teams have dealt with this, but not at the end of the year where you're looking at next year sucking, middle of this year. And he was the best player, at least the player they built it around, even if McBride, you feel, became the best player. And I've done shows about that going back to last year, so I could hear that argument and McBride being the best overall. But Oscar was the guy they built the team around. They had to change the strategy. They had to change the lineups pretty much seemingly every week, every game. And that's not what Huggins likes to do. Veteran coaches don't like to do that. He likes to stick with something, the bread and butter, and go and ride it all season long. For better or worse, Huggins likes to do that. He was forced to adapt and adjust constantly this year. And yeah, he didn't do it on his own. He was forced to. But to his credit, he did it. He did it well. He got this team at one point to number 6 in the country towards the end of the year. He got this team to a 3 seed. He did get this team a win in the NCAA tournament. He did allow Miles McBride to emerge. Deuce now talking about an NBA career that wasn't discussed prior, really. Despite emerging last year, me calling him the team MVP, I don't think anyone was going that crazy. And there's some kinks here in the armor, for sure. Maybe Culver's value diminished. But he had to deal with so much. This was one of Huggins' best coaching performances in terms of what you expect coming in. Everything he had to deal with, the roller coaster ride, including a pandemic, missing 2 weeks because of the pandemic, changing the schedule constantly, dealing with the best conference in the country, and getting him to where they got him. So he's had more success before, of course, but this is one of his better coaching performances. And in totality, for my grade on this year, I'm giving it a B-. I obviously can't go A. I don't want to go B+ because it wasn't Sweet 16 at least. I don't want to go below B-, though, and I'm normally a tough grader. I'm not trying to be half-class full just to do it, guys. I know I'm an alum, but I tell you, if it was bad and it was F, I would tell you it was bad and it was an F. It wasn't bad and it wasn't an F. This was a disappointing season and a disappointing end to the season, for sure. No way to avoid that. No way to deny that. If it got to the Sweet 16, I wouldn't say disappointing is involved here, depending on what happens, maybe if they blew a game. But Sweet 16 was my benchmark. When you're this good, when you're this talented, even with everything they dealt with, and when you're number 6 in the country at one point towards the end of the season, perennially top 15. I get it. It's an 11-seed Syracuse team. It's not the 6. It's not a better seed. I get it. But it was a bad matchup. The zone's not something they dealt with. They don't know Syracuse, even though you as a fan know Syracuse. It's going to be tough for teams to deal with that aren't used to it. And there's no other team in the Big 12 that kind of mirrors it. So people can point to Pitt, who we cover here, of course, at Pittsburgh Sports now and have done their post-game shows. They beat Syracuse, their worst team. I hear it, but they're used to the zone. They play against the zone all year. They're built more to the zone. They understand the zone. They could scheme against the zone. It's in their film from the year prior. You can't do that in less than 48 hours. West Virginia doesn't have that anymore. They don't play against that style. So it was a bad matchup. And they almost won the game. And if they maybe would have incorporated the second half strategy of just taking whatever the shot is, even if you're not normally a three-point shooting team, they got hot enough. McNeil and company got hot enough. They might actually have won the game anyway. But they had to change the lineup constantly, going to McNeil again, McNeil and Sherman switching out between who was a starter, who was a bench player, who was that sixth man. Sherman kind of fit into that role now. But this was an overall versatile team that eventually filled itself out. It took a while to get there. They had to switch things out. So I'm going to say B- because it wasn't more. It could have been more. You maybe would say it should have been more. I don't think this is one of those years you can say in Bob Huggins' career this was a missed title opportunity because he has yet to achieve the national title, which is the only thing he hasn't achieved in his career. I don't think you can blame him for not being in the Hall of Fame and say he's legitimately not deserving of being in there without the national title when Eddie Sutton, John Chaney, and several others have a lot of wins, but less than Huggins without a national title enter in that Hall of Fame. And yeah, they had to wait, but now Huggins is waiting, eventually cut the waiting off and let him in where he deserves to be. He's achieved 900 wins and everything else I mentioned, the 2 Final Fours, the Sweet 16s, the Elite Eights, the conference championship in the Big East when it was a gauntlet To get one then when it was a gauntlet, that's outstanding. Pitt, for its success, didn't get one or didn't get a Final Four at that point. That was a championship and a Final Four. And yeah, conference championships were certainly won by other programs. But to get one then, outstanding. There's no Huggins slander. He deserves the Hall of Fame. Everyone knows it. Okay? And it's more impressive doing it Huggins' way. It's more impressive to have those 900 wins, as Charles Barkley said, after the Morehead State win. It's more impressive to win 900 games the way Huggins has done it without the McDonald's All-Americans, without ever doing it at a blue blood. He never coached at a Kansas, at a Duke, at an Indiana, at now a Syracuse. You're looking at the people ahead of him and where they've coached. And some of them built that up from nothing, from the mud, from the dust, to become a blue blood. But once they got to a blue blood, then it's pretty easy recruiting for multiple decades of those wins. Huggins has never been able to say this is easy recruiting or go into a living room and say, I guarantee you this or I guarantee you that. Or Huggins is sometimes desperate. He got to get those 3 stars. He's not getting a 5-star. He'll get the most out of you, but it's been tougher for Huggins. But overall this year, I'd give it a B-, in all honesty. And on to the future a little bit here. And this is a question mark. I'll have to reevaluate and probably do more of these until we get there because we don't know. And there's been more players to enter the transfer portal so far this year in a month and a half of it being possible, really, or the announcements out there. There's been over halfway to the total from last year, and there's been more at this point than it was at this point last year, compounded to 7 to the 10th degree and then some. And I get COVID is involved there, but it's running amok a little bit. And I get players faring things out. They can leave now. A coach could leave before and screw them, and players go for a coach. A coach could screw them over and bounce, and they had no recourse and kind of ruins their college career in some respect because they have to sit out. I get it. It's now fair, but also the other end is if a coach says a curse word to a player or says the wrong thing, the player can just up and leave and kind of ruin things for the coach too. So now it's going a little bit crazy. I don't know how you rein this in while keeping it fair, but I'll digress there. I don't think anyone like that. We already had Oscar leave. Oscar left this program, of course. I don't think anybody like that is leaving the West Virginia program. Likely Sherman's going overseas. I think Sherman's going overseas. It'd be great if he came back. He's for the program. He certainly is that great. I think now he's fitting into that 6-man role. Maybe throw him back in the rotation if you have to. He's proven he can score 20 in games in those spots. He can shoot. He can score. And that's been big. McNeil the same. I think veteran players like that, if they can get paid overseas, obviously Huggins is going to be fair and tell them their truth. He's going to evaluate them properly. He's going to tell them if the NBA's reality is not for them. So if you can make money overseas, you make money overseas. I don't think they can come back just for another shot at it. McBride, though, a sophomore. The NBA is not happening yet, or it shouldn't yet, I don't think. If he can get a second round, he wants the money, okay. He evaluated himself. He got himself to that point by emerging. But Huggins is going to be real with him. He's been way too inconsistent. He needs to be better. He can use another year of college basketball. But it's hard to tell anybody to not take the money. So he'll be fair to them. But if McBride, Culver, again, got to be better, got to fit in more with McBride. We'll see that in the offseason if they can work together. If most of these players come back, with what's going on in the Big 12, Texas losing guys, Cunningham gone, going to be a top pick in the NBA, Baylor going to lose players, Oklahoma going to lose players, Kansas going to lose players, even though they're Watchman to repeat and bring more in, but they kind of had a down year for normally what Kansas is. They were out of the ranking at one point, even though finishing as a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. So those of you might be a favorite. If most of them come back, if say 3 out of 4, even 2 out of 4 of those key players come back, we're talking about Culver, McBride, McNeil, Sherman. They might be the favorite in the conference. In all honesty, I could argue that. Certainly one of them. In terms of star players returning, quality players returning, key players for you returning, and experience. They're going to have the experience those other programs won't have. Those other contenders won't have because they're going to have their star players gone, and they're going to have to retool. West Virginia might have to retool the next year, but for next season, they might be ready for a run. And maybe losing prior to the Sweet 16, so there's no call to the jeweler. There's no ring. There's no trophy. There's nothing on the mantle. There's nothing to really to be impressed by this season. Early exit in the conference tournament as well. That's why it does end as disappointing a year, despite not necessarily a bad one for the adversity and everything that had to be overcome this year and was achieved this year. But there's no trophies. There's nothing to really to brag about. Early exit in the conference tournament, failing to get to the Sweet 16 in the NCAA tournament. Because of all that, maybe that makes them hungry and they want to come back next year. So we will see. That does it for this one, though. That's my relatively instant reaction. Of course, not right away. That's over in the postgame show. Feel free to find that at Pittsburgh Sports Live over there in the Pittsburgh postgame section playlist of the channel. You can find this show here on a mic drop section of the channel. Also over there, the mic drop section of WV Sports Now. And of course, all through our social media. Bottom of this video, hit that subscribe button, smash that button. It's free to do so. Will help us get all of our content to you. It is free again, thanks to our sponsors throughout the Pittsburgh Sports Now family of networks. And I'm being fair to the Mountaineers, okay? At one point, you're sixth in the country. They overcame a lot to get there. You got to get to the Sweet 16. So it is a disappointing season overall. That's the word. The West Virginia Mountaineers 2020-2021 season, despite dealing with tons of adversity, despite having the talent that they had, and despite achieving what they eventually achieved and reaching the peaks they achieved, it ends disappointing. West Virginia Mountaineers 2020-2021 season ends in disappointing fashion, but it wasn't a bad one overall. For all the adversity, there was success. Talent emerged, but it once again ended with West Virginia being almost heaven, of course.